Let me share my screen. I have a PowerPoint deck that I have put together just to show what I want to cover today and what we'll be talking about. Now, something I want to mention to everybody is while I was waiting to get started, someone messaged me privately. They actually asked me something. They're like, hey, Faz, is there any way I can get an exercise file? And I let them know that actually after the training, we'll give you access to the recording and the file that I use and this PowerPoint deck inside of Offsite. So if you are an Offsite member, you'll see all that stuff available as a post, probably in the event comments there very shortly after the training itself. Right now, let's kick back. Let's get started. And I see I have a large group today. I love it. It's 83 people. These larger 1-hour sessions, they tend to bring a lot. Let's start out with a quick little, how are you doing today? And because we're talking about Excel, this is not an exam. I just want to know, besides how you're doing, what would you consider yourself with Excel? Do you feel like you're a beginner, intermediate user, or an advanced user? Yeah, do let me know how you're doing. Otherwise, I'm going to think you're a robot. That's the first question that you have to answer. You know how you check mark that question? Are you a robot? That's my test for you. Not a robot, good. Oh, you're giving me robot vibes. Someone said beep boop. Nice. You have some advanced users. Advanced because of learn it. I like to hear that, John. Intermediate. It's Friday. It is Friday. I've had a long week too. A lot of trainings. Someone asked me how you're doing. I'm doing pretty well myself. I'm very well rested. I'm a little sore from the gym. I did deadlifts yesterday, but I'm very well rested. I didn't hit my PR. I didn't hit the PR I needed to, so I was a little disappointed. Yeah. Looks like we have a good range. We have some beginner users, intermediate users, advanced users. There is some stuff I want to cover today, though. With visualizing your data, I actually have a set of topics that I want to focus on. I'll probably leave a little time at the end, like 5 to 10 minutes, maybe 5 minutes or so, just to see if there's any questions, any wish list items that you're hoping to see. If not, we can save them for Offsite. If nothing gets answered, don't forget we have Offsite. You can always post on Offsite. And within 48 hours or so, me or another instructor will get the answer. Today, I was actually looking at the topics and I saw another member from the community answered the question that I was going to answer for someone. And I'm like, that was exactly the goal that I wanted for this community. And it turned into that. I loved it. Yeah. But I do have a set of topics that I want to focus on. I put together an Excel file and some set of topics that might be beneficial to hear about within the hour. Earlier, I did mention how Office 365 users and Office 2021 has been released, meaning we have a slightly new interface, and we also have a new set of functions that we get to use. One of them is XLOOKUP, which it's not replacing VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP is still there, but XLOOKUP is a lot easier to fill out, especially if you're merging data sets. Sometimes your data is not put together correctly. You have your product list from a database. You have your sales reps from a database. You have the actual sales from a database. Let's put those together into one list, into one table. Why would we put it together into one table? Well, as we all know, there's this tool they invented in 2007. Ooh, they invented in 2007. It's called a pivot table. Really quickly, let's use the chat for this. Can you build a pivot table? If I were to ask you to build one, a basic one with a yes or not yet. Good. It's okay. It's okay. Someone said no idea. You're going to see me build one from the ground up. It's a tool that allows me to summarize large amounts of data. There's been a ton of enhancements that I want to discuss. Yeah, it's okay. You used to know how. You'll get the updated version today. I also want to talk about using visuals, using charts. I mean, I go around to different organizations And I get the privilege to talk to some of these executives and leadership teams before I start my training. And they let me know things that they're very busy these days. And in fact, they also have a ton of data being thrown at them. They have a ton of reports being thrown at them. And they don't have too much time to process these things. So what they ask is there any way we can have visuals? Can we have charts? I understand the report looks nice, it's formatted correctly, but can we add in an additional visual to that report as well? So these are the set of topics I do want to focus on. Basically report building, summarizing data. I actually do have an Excel file that I'll be sharing inside of Offset at the end of the session to cover these topics. For right now, I do want you to kick back and treat this session as a demo, and hopefully we'll have a 5-minute Q&A towards the end. But if you have any questions, use the chat, and I'll occasionally pause to see if there's any questions, or if anything's unclear, or if we need to repeat anything again very quickly. All right, let me slowly get started. Hopefully everyone's excited. Hopefully everyone's ready to go. You got your cup of coffee with you. If it's around that time, you should be drinking coffee. I know we're all in different time zones. Let me open up the Excel file. And this is actually the Excel file. Good morning, good morning. This is actually the Excel file that you will be receiving inside of Offsite if you do decide to join. So I'm currently looking at an Excel file. There's 4 worksheets, 3 that we're actually going to work on. One's just a little diagram that I have that I want to show everybody. But I'm actually looking at a very common situation here. My very first worksheet, I call it prepared data for pivot tables here. And I've worked with real life data sets. I do one-on-one sessions, I do consultation sessions, and the more I go around and see real data sets, I learn that a lot of them are not prepared yet to be analyzed. They're separated, they might have blank rows. Like for example, I pulled this information out of a database and I exported it to Excel. And the database has everything separated. It has all my products and how much each thing's cost in a separate table. And it even has another table where I have the sales reps and what region they're coming from. And then another export that I did was I actually added in the entire sales table. But there are some things, and I have to do this maybe every month or every year when I have to analyze this and create this report to see who's the top seller maybe. But there's issues. I actually don't even have the revenue. There's no revenue. I have how many units they sold. I have what product they've sold. And I have how much the discount was they applied. But I don't have the actual revenue. That's in a separate list. I have to do some calculation. I have to create the column. Or what if I wanted to figure out what region was selling the most? Well, these sales reps all have a region associated to them. I don't have them in this table. I mean, I can sit there and one by one try to find each one. That's a good question. This session is being recorded. It'll be available on Offsite later. So now that we see this here, what I want to do is let's prepare our data a bit. And I want to use a new function. I'm going to use a function called XLOOKUP. Really quickly, has anyone had the privilege to use that yet? XLOOKUP with a yes or a not yet? Nice, I see someone already has. It's available for Office 2019 and up. So if you have 2019, Office 365, or Office 2021, you'll have XLOOKUP. Yeah. Thank you for being here. I'm going to go ahead and use the equal XL and select XLOOKUP here. Nice. Someone said I've been taught H and VLOOKUP. This is the newest one. I believe it was released in June of 2021 or June of 2020. Yeah, fairly new. Yeah. all we have to do is worry about three things: a lookup value, a lookup array, and a return array. So what I want to do is I want to use the sales rep from this list, and I want to look it up. I want to look up this sales rep in this list. Apologize for that line. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight this list here. Now, what does that do? It's going to go ahead and search for the sales rep, Christy, inside of this very large list of sales reps that I have. And once it finds it, I have a third thing that I need to fill out called the return array. Now, if I hit comma here and fill out the return array, it's asking me, what value do you want returned that matches this row inside of this list? So what value would you want returned that matches this row? I want the regions returned. So in order to return the regions, I'm going to highlight the entire region column. These columns might be thousands and thousands of rows long. I usually use keyboard shortcuts. And it goes all the way down, well, until it meets a blank. And that's honestly all I need to fill out an XLOOKUP. I just need those three required arguments. Now, just for good keeping, what I'm going to do is I'm going to absolutely reference the lookup array, and I'm going to absolutely reference the return array. So that way, as I use my autofill handle, it searches through the same list. Just the sales reps change. So now, if I go ahead and double click here, I just double click my autofill. I've brought over all the correct regions for each sales rep into the sales table. Now we can get really advanced and build a macro that will automate this process for us every month. We talk about that in our Excel Advanced course. It is exactly the same as a VLOOKUP, except that there's less arguments that we fill out. Our lookup value does not have to be in the first column. If this was VLOOKUP, our lookup value would have to be in the first column of this list. It doesn't have to be in the first column. It can be in any column. So this is going to replace VLOOKUP simply because it has less rules, less guidelines that we have to follow. Yeah, a lot easier for us, the user. Let me do one more example here, because I also want to see, no problem. I also want to see the revenue. And I actually have every product. And I have a list of how much each product costs. So I can use the XLOOKUP here. But this time, I'm going to use the products from this list. A lot easier to manipulate than VLOOKUP. Unless you're really familiar with VLOOKUP and you've already gotten accustomed to it, or index and match, there's another one. XLOOKUP will alleviate a lot of the problems you usually faced. Now, I also have a lookup array. It's basically where it can look up the products. I'm going to do Control-Shift down to grab the entire lookup array. So essentially what this does is it's going to find doublers in this list. No, it can be in different worksheets. It can also be in different workbooks. Those are really hard to maintain though, because if you move the workbook into a different folder, or if you share the workbook, the users won't have access to those other links. So I usually like to compute, it's all in the same workbook. Worksheet to worksheet is okay. Workbook to workbook, I try to stay away from. Unless I absolutely have to. I have to, no matter what, keep these two data pieces separate for legal reasons. XLOOKUP can also do a horizontal search as well. XLOOKUP can also do a horizontal search as well. Give me 1 second. Let me finish up this example here. So with this return array, this is the item that I want returned that matches the doublers column. I want to return the price. That's not the revenue. That's just the price. I'm going to absolute reference these things just to be safe. So when I use my autofill, it doesn't change the values within them. But I also want to multiply this with the units that I've sold. And I want to multiply it with, here, check this out, 1 minus the discount. Well, if I minus 1 minus 0.03, that's 0.97. That's going to give me 97% of the price times 2, which is how much I sold. Absolutely. Can you please explain absolute reference? These dollar signs. So do you notice, I'm going to hit enter here, and I'm going to drag down my autofill. Look at what happens to this formula at the bottom. This cell turns into I3. This cell turns into J3. This cell turns into K3, where originally it was I2, J2, and K2. And if I do it again, look, if I do it one more time, it turned to I4, J4, K4. Absolute referencing it, adding in dollar signs, locks it into place, locks it with certain values that you don't want to iterate, like the values you're looking through and the values you want returned. The values you're searching, you want to change, so you don't absolute reference them. And Sarah's giving a pretty good tip there. If you highlight them and click F4 on your keyboard, the top row, it will cycle through and add the dollar signs for you across the cell addresses. Yeah, whether you want to do a column lock, a row lock, or an entire lock. So we're basically explaining the difference between a relative reference, this is relative, versus an absolute reference. There. Great question. Great question. I'm going to go ahead and double click the autofill there. So 1 second, let me see if I have this here. I actually was working on a video on XLOOKUP just over the weekend. And let's see, give me 1 second. It'll be posted on YouTube very shortly. But I want to, someone's explaining, and does it also replace HLOOKUP? That's what someone's asking me. Does XLOOKUP also replace HLOOKUP, which is a horizontal lookup? Let me show you something. I have another example that, if it allows me to load it, would be a very good way to describe how XLOOKUP actually works. So what I want to do is I want to do an XLOOKUP that returns a particular quantity for a material and a group. So not only am I searching for a material, I'm also searching for a specific group. That will return a particular item. So I want to return a result, not a whole column, just one single result. I can do an XLOOKUP with a two-way search. I can do a vertical look and a horizontal look within the same formula. It's a pretty advanced, this is a pretty advanced example. I'm just going to demo it for you. So let's start out. I'm going to look up for the wood, right? And I'm going to use the lookup array. I'm going to look through that. I don't know what I want to return yet. It's another list that I have to search through. But this time it's a horizontal list. I'm going to do an XLOOKUP that looks for B. And inside of this list, horizontal. And it's going to return an item from these rows. I'm going to close out both parentheses and hit enter. Pretty robust example, but as you can see, you can also do a H lookup too. John, thank you for bringing that up. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, you're going to see a YouTube video on this very shortly, everybody. There's a lot of different examples that I have on XLOOKUP, but no problem, no problem. Now that we've discussed that, I do want to talk about our next set of topics here, because we've prepared data. We've prepped data. We have it all in one list. I want to start talking about summarizing data, building reports, and all the new enhancements that we have that come along with that. Really quickly, though, we're doing great on time. I just want to check. Any questions? I see a few of us asked some already, which is amazing. They've been great. Are there any questions? Hopefully we can pick up and add XLOOKUP into our tool belt after today's training and start using that as one of the functions we have available. Not seeing anything pop up. Feeling good. Hopefully the pace is okay for everybody. Let me continue. What I want to do is I want to start talking about another tool called a pivot table. And let me show you this really large data set that I've already prepared. For the most part, I've already put it all together. It's this sheet called data. It's rather large. It's the order details for an entire month for a particular year. Order details for December of 2014. In fact, if I look through this data right now, I can actually see it's 26 columns. It's 26 columns, and it's also tracking some financials where I'm figuring out how many units we've sold, the quantity we've sold, the revenue, shipping fees for certain orders that we've had, and certain salespeople as well. Now, if someone were to ask you, hey, who's the top seller for December? I mean, there's two types of data analysts. Well, there's many types of data analysts, depending on their skill sets. One data analyst might not know about pivot table reports. So they're going to sit there and they're filtering each item one by one using that drop down, and they're going to go find out the revenue. Depending on how many salespeople you actually have in your organization, that's either going to be impossible or it's just going to be a very time-consuming task. When instead, Excel has tools that we can use to build reports for us instead of us doing it by hand. Figuring out the values and putting it on a spreadsheet, that's us doing it by hand. What I'm going to do to this list of information is I want to convert it. I want to insert something to it. It's called a table. This will allow me to, in turn, create a pivot table, which will help me build my report. So I'm going to go into this list here. Remember, I'm actually already inside of it. And if I go over to my Insert tab, I have a tool known as table, but I don't ever click on it. I just hit Control and the letter T, or Command T if I'm on a Mac. And as long as I'm inside the list, as long as I'm inside of here, it's actually going to create a table out of the entire data set. Cool, I'll hit OK. Just for good keeping, everybody, I'm going to go into this brand new tab that popped up called Table Design. It only shows up once you have a table and you're inside of it, once you're actually inside of the table like I am here. And I just want to give this data set a name. So that way, if I ever swap it with another data set, or if I analyze this in a Power BI dashboard, it has a name when I import it. So I'm just going to call this table December 2014 sales. Fairly large name, but it's okay. Now, something that we get to use when we have tables is a set of tools. One of the tools that I want to talk about today is the ability to summarize large amounts of data using a pivot table. Now, this tool is very important, the Summarize with Pivot Table. It's found inside the Table Design tab. And some people do this, they go to the Insert tab. It's also in the Insert tab. It's the same thing. The same thing. However, the Insert tab does have a nice, pretty friendly AI tool, an artificial intelligence tool that just looks at the data and creates basic pivot tables for you. It's known as recommended pivot tables. And for beginners that don't build pivot tables too often, I always encourage them to start from there. So that way they have a nice foundation for whatever pivot table they're going to build, because they can just edit the pivot table that it gives them. But for me, I'm going to build it from scratch. I'm not going to use any of the recommendations. That's been available since 2016. I'm just going to build a pivot table by hitting Summarize with Pivot Table from my Table Design tab. It automatically picks up the entire data set that you're inside of, as long as your cell address box is within it. Notice how it even shows the name of the table that I've created. I'm going to build my pivot table on a new worksheet. Now, there is a tool called Power Pivot. We're not discussing it in this session, but I believe we do discuss it in our Excel pivot table course, where you can add your data sources to a data model and use DAX to connect them with the related function. It's a very interesting tool that helps you prep data, kind of similar to what we did with XLOOKUP. Yeah. I'm going to hit OK here. So I'm going to zoom in just to avoid squinting eyes. And I want everyone to know something. I'm inside of an empty pivot table right now. Because of that fact, because I'm inside of an empty pivot table, Excel has given me 3 different things. It's given me 1, a pivot table analyze tab. 2, it's given me a design tab. And 3, it's given me something called a field list that it's now customizable. We'll talk about that in a second. So if I actually get this green box and I move it, it removes those 3 things. It thinks you no longer want to build the report. But in order to actually get those 3 things back, I have to click in this area. And I'm back in business. Back in business. So there's something I want you to know. If you are an Office 365 user, we have this toolbox. There's an L there. It just aligned perfectly with that line on the square. So it says 2. You're supposed to say tool. There's this tools box. And when you click on it, it allows you to rearrange the field list. This is actually the area that we use to build the pivot table. I personally don't like the way it's designed. It shows you all of the columns that you have from the data set. They're now called fields. And then it shows you on the very bottom these 4 boxes that you have to create your report that we're going to go over in just a second. But there's 26 different fields in here, and there's a little scroll bar. So what I like to do is, well, one is I like to alphabetize this list. Makes it easier to look through, because right now it's not alphabetized. It's just in the same order that the data so happen to be in. I'm going to go all the way to the bottom of this toolbox, and the option to sort the fields from A to Z becomes available. Besides that, I also want to get rid of the scroll bar. So you notice how this area is stacked on top of each other, the fields and the boxes. There's actually a new setting that we have that allows us to put it side by side. And I prefer this much over the current setting that we have, especially if you have a ton of fields that you want to see the name of. This is just my preferred setting for building the report. Makes it easier to create the actual visualization to summarize the data. I actually do want to see a top seller. That's the whole point of this report that I'm building. And I have 4 different boxes that I can drag and drop a certain field into. Depending on what box I throw it into, it's going to create a different aspect of my report. So it's a nice feature. Takes a while to get used to. This does make it the default view. So if I open up another pivot table, if I go to, let's say, this sheet here, and I hit Control T, and I hit Summarize, it's going to automatically have this view for all of the workbooks. This is known as an application level setting. It's not a workbook setting, it's an application setting. Yeah, someone messaged me again. Is this being recorded? It sure is. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It is being recorded. It'll be available on offsite after the training. Yeah. All right. That's a good question. So this is going to stay until I decide to change it again from the toolbox. No fee for offsite. No fee for offsite. Take a look at it inside the link right above you, and a few chats above you. Let me grab this salesperson. And what I want to do is I want to create a report that tracks the top seller. So I'm going to drag and drop it into the rows box. And it's going to end up giving me a unique list of every salesperson I had inside of the data. There's only 8 salespeople. They've made a ton of sales, but there's only 8 of them. And when I ended up throwing them into the rows box, it listed them down these rows. I could have also put the salesperson inside the columns box, but that's not too nice of a summary. I don't know, it seems too large for me. I feel like this should be a summary report, more compact than this. Unless it has to be this big, but it doesn't. The rows gives me a better alternative. I also want to end up seeing the revenue that they're bringing in. So I'm just going to grab the revenue and I'm going to drag and drop it into this box called values, which essentially will aggregate all of the values, all the sales they've had. It'll run the sum function on all the sales they've had. So I can tell that each salesperson has made quite a few sales. If I need to, I hope you do this when you're building reports. You go to the report and you format it a bit. Oh no. Come back. Okay, we're back. My Excel is just having a hard time today. I'm going to sort this with a right click. I mean, wouldn't it be nice to analyze this and already have the top seller on top? All right. And same with the revenue. Wouldn't you want to see dollar signs and maybe remove the decimal places? I'm going to right click and I can actually change the number format of the sum of revenue column within my report. I'm just going to change it to currency and knock off the decimal places since they're such large numbers. I like it. I like it. But what if we wanted to filter this report? We wanted to do an analysis of each salesperson. And we wanted to compare maybe Nancy and Andrew's sales one by one. Or Andrew and Ann's sales. Yes, we have this little drop down, but that's been there for years. It's a filter tool. In 2013, they've released a new tool that allows us to filter data sets. It's found inside the Pivot Table Analyze tab. I'm going to insert a new type of filter called a slicer that's found in the Filter command group of the Pivot Table Analyze tab. And when I insert a slicer, I'm going to choose salesperson as the column I want to create a slicer for. Thank you so much. Someone said I had it. I'm glad you took my course. Check this out though. As you can see, I actually have a now an on screen. I can click on it and it filters my pivot table for me. This is known as a slicer. It was released in 2013 for tables and pivot tables. Yeah, I can actually clear the filter from here as well. It's a pretty advanced tool there. Oh, let me first sort this again. There we go. Cool. So I'm liking this report. It looks clean, but there's a lot of things that are wrong with my data. Someone said, do that again. Yeah, here, I'm going to add in another slicer. I want to filter the report based off the order date. Okay. So I'm going to go to the Pivot Table Analyze tab. Oh, come back. Why does my Excel not want to work today? Give me 1 second. Hopefully it comes back. If not, okay. There we go. In the Pivot Table Analyze tab, you have a command group called filter. And earlier I added in a slicer. But if you have a date range, like an order date that you want to filter by, you can insert something called a timeline. And I'm going to do order date for this one and hit OK. So now this here, I'm going to filter for the month of December. And I'm going to change it to days, since this is only sales of December. And now if I want to see how much we've sold on December 3rd of 2014, I can see we sold 1,000. If I wanted to see for a specific salesperson, like Laura, I can see that she didn't have any sales. I'm going to clear this here. I'm going to clear this here. So we have slicers and timelines. In addition to this, I can actually go into my pivot table and create. I know this seems pretty interesting. This one's, to me, the more advanced portion of it. No problem, Gary. What I want to do is I want to create a new field. So what I need to do is I actually need to distribute bonuses for each person's sales. I actually have to give them 5% of whatever they sold as a bonus. Now, I don't have a field in here called bonus. I don't have a field in my data called bonus. I don't have a column. I can sit there and create one every month. I can deal with that, or I can build a field within the pivot table. These are known as calculated fields. I think I spelled that right. Yeah, calculated fields. So let me build a calculated field that will figure out the bonus of each salesperson by analyzing this report a little further. We're doing gorgeous on time, everybody. I love it. And with this pivot table analyze tab, what I want to do is I want to take advantage of a command group called calculations. It's okay if you haven't used this one yet. I consider this the advanced. We talk about this in the pivot tables course. And when you click on it, there's a field items and sets tool where you can build a calculated field. And it lets you use your pre-existing fields, and you can create a formula essentially with it. Here, I'm going to call it bonus. And I'm just going to use the revenue of each salesperson. And I'm going to insert it. I'm going to multiply it with 5%. That's all I'm going to do. And I'm going to hit add. Now, calculated fields are extremely useful. Hit add there. Hit OK. And now, as you can see, I've added in a bonus field to my report that I can use or exclude if I don't need it. Right. I just want to check. It's been a quiet group, but the questions that have been asked are amazing. Are there any questions so far? Feeling good about everything, everybody? I'm sure everyone's like, I want to try this. I want to try this. Don't worry, you can try it after class. I promise. All right. So I was actually working on a consultation. Just, I want to say, maybe it was in person, so maybe like 2 years ago, and it was on pivot tables. And when I walked in to the consultation, the person already had everything done, and I was so baffled. I had a whole week, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do? They're like, this is last year's report, and the person that made it isn't here, and they've tasked me to make this year's report. And she's like, I have all the data, and you are here to build it, and you want to just show me, how you build it. I'm like, but it's already built. I'm like, you can just swap them. And she's like, I had a feeling that you can do that. You can just swap the data from this year to last year. And she just didn't know how, so I actually set it up for her, and it worked out pretty smoothly. It was actually within an hour or two. So what I want to do is I want to show you something. I have another sheet called complete data. This time it's the orders for the entire year. Now someone's asking me, when do we build pivot tables? When you have a large amount of data that you want to summarize, that you want to analyze, like this complete data. Maybe I want to now swap the report that I've created with this data instead. So inside the table design, it's extremely useful to give these tables names. So I'm going to call it table 2014 sales. It has to be one word. Because if you ever need to swap data sources, I can always go to my pivot table analyze tab. And one of the options is to change the data source. And as long as the columns match up, it'll swap. The columns have to align. Oh no, my Excel keeps. What happened there? Oh no. Cancel. 1 second. I clicked too fast for my computer today. I'll definitely have to do a restart later. Let me use the complete data here. I'm just going to use the complete data and hit OK. So look, I've actually swapped it with the entire year. This has 100. Look, all the values increased quite a bit. And now if I switch it to months, I can see that July had some sales too. October had some sales too, and not just December. Now, the cool thing about pivot tables is that you now have the ability to also create a visual out of this report. And I know you're thinking, oh, these are visual. Yes, they're visual filters. But we also have something called, I'm going to open it up, called a pivot chart that we have available. Just a visual representation of our data. Let me create a pivot chart. And I have quite a bit of charts in Excel in this version, but I'm going to pick the bar chart so that these names show up nice and large, because they're really large names. And the bar chart also shows that the data is still ongoing, and it just gives me enough room for everything. And I'll hit OK here. Cool. Trying to give me enough room and make everything visible. Let me move this to the side and make this here and zoom into this stuff here just so we can see it. Cool. You know, everything's connected. If I filter this report for Andrew, my pivot chart is also going to filter itself as well. I do admit, though, I personally usually clean up the pivot chart. This is something I might even put in a presentation. So what I typically do is I hide these filter buttons. I right click and I hide all the field buttons on the chart. I also, if there's this legend here, that's fine. If I want, I can get this axis selected and just delete it. And I can also instead add something called data labels. Data labels. They're fairly large. Let me make them a little smaller. I'm just going to click on them and decrease the font size to them. I'm going to make the bonus one a little smaller, since that's not the main focus right now. There we go. And I'm also going to get rid of these grid lines. I mean, we don't need them anymore technically. The pivot chart does not indicate the date range. No, this chart did not indicate the date range here, but I do have this slicer, this timeline slicer will still work with the pivot chart. So if I want to see just November, it's going to filter for just the date range. So check this out. I was actually teaching a course, I think this week or last week, called Presenting Financials. Presenting Financials. It was a combination of this, and at the very end, I talked a little bit about how to put this in a PowerPoint to present it. And I showed the class something that really it sparked something for them. And what I essentially did is I added the chart to a PowerPoint, but I linked it so that if a value were to change here, the chart would also change in the PowerPoint. And I think that's something very useful to discuss based off the responses I got in that last session. Let me just go ahead and open up this PowerPoint that I have for our topic list, and I'm just going to insert a slide. And if you want, you can actually get charts from Excel and copy them. Just right click and copy, or you can go to the Home tab and hit copy. And in PowerPoint, something really cool is if I select this placeholder and I go to the paste option, I have an option called use destination theme and link data. Link data. Now keep in mind, this has to be on my computer. Here, let me add a value to my pivot table. I'm going to call this the linked Excel chart. This will probably be the last topic we talk about before we dive into the Q&A. And I'm just going to go back to this pivot table. Oh, come on, Excel. And If you ever need to add a value, I'm going to go to complete data. I'm just going to add myself. I'm going to put Faz Kareem at the very bottom. I'm just going to put Faz Kareem. And I'm from the East Bay, so I'm just going to put East. And I have to put some revenue. I'm going to say that I sold 30,000 in one sale. Cool. And I'm just going to go to this pivot table and I'm going to refresh it. I'm going to refresh it. Cool. Oh, 1 second. Did I do the right data? As inserted revenue. Yeah, I'm in there. 1 second. I just want my name to show up. Refresh. Oh, there it is. It's just saying that I don't have any sales. That's really weird. I did put in sales. Give me 1 second. Revenue. I'm going to add in another row. As green. And a 1,000. I'm going to go back to sheets and refresh. Interesting. It's still saying grayed out. Interesting. I'm going to have to dig into that after the session. 1 second. I want to try this. I'm going to swap it back to the original data. I'm going to change the data source. Maybe there's something broken with that data that I didn't know. And let me change it back to the original data for December. Alrighty. Oh, I know why, everybody. I had this filter applied. 1 second. I bet you it was that. I clear this filter. There we go. Okay. I found the culprit. I'm sure with 90 people in here, someone saw that and they're just like, come on, fast, come on, figure it out. But let's take a look at this table here. Look, it's already inside. The 30,000 value is already inside of the chart for my presentation. Friends, what we've covered in this session, there was quite a bit. There was quite a bit in the hour. Was a sneak peek of our Excel intermediate class, a little bit of our Excel pivot tables class, a little bit of our Excel advanced class. These topics, I just want to hear, what's your top takeaway before I give it over to Saskia? What's your top takeaway here from this hour that you've had with me? I know there's been a lot, but if you can just summarize it to one thing, what would it be? XLOOKUP and the linking, I'm glad I showed that, right? I think linking PowerPoints is extremely useful, especially with visualizing data. Yeah. Clear filters with fun, refreshing data. That's a good takeaway. Clear filters and refreshing data. I want to try XLOOKUP. That's a good one. Remember, you have to be an Office 365 user to try it. But hopefully right after class, we'll upload that Excel file to Offsite for you to give a practice. Yeah. Saskia, I do know you have a few finishing touches to say. I've only left you 2 minutes. I'm so sorry.
No problem at all. Thank you so much, Faz. Everyone in the chat, or just share a reaction of how you felt about today's session. It was a really great one. Thank you so much, Faz.
Have fun doing it.
Yes, I just wanted to wrap up today's session, just telling you a little bit more about Offsite if any of you are new. So Offsite is Learnit's free community for everyone. You're able to go in there if you join and access today's recording and presentation, get live instructor help, get access to our exclusive Ask the Expert sessions, which are only available for Offsite members. You're also able to get badges of certification and also some exclusive offers for learning classes as well. We do have 2 upcoming classes next week as well in Offsite. We have our Ask the Expert for data visualization with Excel. So that's going to be on Wednesday, the 8th at 8 a.m. in Offsite. And then we also have on Friday, the 10th at 8:30 a.m. strategic goal setting and planning for success. So I'll be leading that as well before Carly returns. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I hope you have a great rest of your Friday and a great weekend as well. Thanks so much, Faz.
No problem, everybody. No problem. All right.